In this movie, I'd like to begin creating some specific documentation for our project. Now, there's a wide variety of documentation types that are required in a typical architectural project. And in this movie, I'm going to look at creating an enlarged floor plan of the dining area. We're going to use that floor plan for a variety of things, but it starts with creating a callout view. So Revit has lots of different view types, as we've seen. So this will be the first time we look at the callout view. Now, I'm here in a file called Enlarged Floor Plan. And on the View tab, you can see lots of different types of views here on the Create panel. We've got our 3D view and our section view that we've looked at before. Right next to that is the Callout button here. If we click the drop-down on the Callout button, we see that it has two options. It has Rectangular and Sketch. Now, if I did the rectangular callout, it's a little bit easier because you just click two opposite points on a rectangle. I could click from here to here. But what you would end up with is about half of the kitchen would be included in that callout area, and that may be undesirable as the kitchen gets fleshed out later in the project. You might not want to see all that equipment and so forth in the dining room plan. The alternative is to use this sketch option right here. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to choose the sketch choice off that drop-down, and that takes me into what Revit calls sketch mode. Now, sketch mode is a mode where you create a two-dimensional sketch using the various tools here on the draw panel, and you can create any shape you like. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'll start out here next to the staircase, and I'll just click my first point, and I'm just going to start drawing some lines. And all I really want to do is make sure that these lines are a little bit larger than the dining room area. Down in the corner there where I have that curve, you can only draw straight lines in this sketch, but in this case, that curve is subtle enough that I don't have to worry too much about following it exactly. Now, you want to make sure that your sketch is completely closed when you're done. And in other words, you want to join up the first point with the last point, and then you'll click the Modify tool here or press Escape twice. You can see the shape of your callout, and when I come up here on the ribbon, I can click this big green Finish Edit Mode. And when I do, you'll see a dashed outline appear in the shape of that callout that we just created. Now, it'll have this bubble associated with it over here. That bubble will eventually fill in with the drawing number and sheet number that this callout gets placed on. Later, when we place views on sheets, we'll see that fill in. For the time being, what I want to do is use this grip right here that's connected directly to the callout head and start to drag it. And notice that you can move this callout head anywhere that you like. It'll stay attached to the perimeter of that callout. I'm going to move it down here into the lower right-hand corner and put it at a slight angle like so. I'm going to click an empty space to deselect the callout. And if you look over at the project browser, you'll see that a new view has been created called Callout of Level 1. Now, you can accept that name if you like, but I'm going to rename it by right-clicking, and I'm going to call it Enlarged Dining Room Plan. Click OK. Now, to open that view, you can either select it here, right-click and choose Go to View, or you can just simply double-click it right here on the project browser. Either one is fine. When the view opens, you're going to see the boundary here, the inner boundary, matches the shape that you sketched for the callout. Notice that it has little blue grips on each edge, and you could use these to fine-tune the shape of the callout. So, for example, right here, you can see that I've kind of unnaturally cut off that doorway right there. So if I wanted to, I could use this grip to start stretching that just slightly to make the callout include the entire door. If there turns out to be some equipment or other things in here that you don't want to see, you could actually choose Edit Crop. That would take you back into the sketch mode, and you could literally draw the sketch up and around the doorway. And if you want to try that, I'll leave that up to you. But for now, I'm going to just go with it like this. So I will just make any little adjustments here just to fine-tune it slightly. There's a few other things that you'll notice here that we might want to address. For example, these grid lines here extend all the way to the virtual rectangle here, and that's simply because the behavior of grid lines is for them to remain lined up with one another. So A and B, it makes sense for them to go a little bit past the callout boundary, but C, maybe not so much. So what you can do here is you can select grid line C, and then you want to be careful not to start to drag it, because if you drag it, it will drag all of them. I'm going to do Control Z and undo that. But I'm going to grab grid line C, and instead I'm going to unlock this end. So when I do that, now this little blue dot here, I can drag grid line C like so, and it will only affect grid line C. And I could do the same thing with grid 4. Unlock it, grab this little dot, stretch that down. And if you want, you can do the same thing with grid 5. Unlock it, drag it down, and I'm going to let this one snap to grid line 4. So now what will happen is these two will move together. See? So if I fine-tune them further, they'll move together, but grid 6 moves independently. So these are just some little fine-tuning adjustments you can make if you like. You don't have to see this outer rectangle for the callout if you don't want to. So there's some toggle switches down here at the bottom of the screen on the view control bar. The first one is here. It looks like a little crop symbol. If you highlight it, it says do not crop the view. If you click that, it actually turns off the cropping behavior. And if I zoom out, you notice we're seeing the entire floor plan again. But notice the crop is still here. The crop region doesn't get deleted. It just gets disabled. So I'm going to re-enable it by clicking that icon again. The one next to it hides the crop region. So if I click that, it stays cropped, but it just turns off the display of that shape. That might make the view look a little bit cleaner here. Now, one more thing to point out to you here. When you create a callout view, Revit automatically adjusts the scale. So you may notice that all the annotation is a little bit smaller here. That's because the scale for this view has changed to 1/4 inch equals a foot. The original view was at 1/8 inch equals a foot, and Revit just simply doubles the scale. I'm going to make one or two more adjustments here. This section line that goes all the way through, you can actually modify that if you like. So I'm going to click on it. And you see this little small, it almost looks like a little Z shape right here. It says gaps and segments. If I click that, it will actually make a gap in the middle of this, and then you get a grip at each end. And I can eliminate that middle portion. I can do it again with this one and eliminate that middle portion. None of this really affects the section itself. It's just affecting the graphic here in this view. Likewise here, maybe I don't want that quite so long, so I can shorten it a little bit. So these are all fine-tune adjustments you can make to start cleaning up the view a little bit. And one last adjustment that I want to do is these lines right here. You may recall in a previous movie where we added rooms and did a colored room plan that we added these room separation lines to make a distinction between the various spaces in this open plan. Well, you don't have to actually keep the display of these room separation lines if you don't want to. If you recall, we had a command called Visibility Graphics. That was here on the View tab, Visibility Graphics, and the room separation lines are actually down here under a category called Lines. And if I expand that with this little plus sign right here, you can see the room separations right there. So I'm going to uncheck that, click OK, and you're going to see those boundary lines disappear, but notice the room is still there. The room is still there, and it's still shaped by those room separation lines. In fact, if I go back to level 1, you'll see that if I zoom in, those room separation lines are still displaying here in level 1. So all we did was hide them here in the enlarged floor plan view. So it makes this view display a little nicer. If those room separation lines display, they will print. So this is why I'm hiding them, because ultimately I'm not going to want them to print in this view. So a callout view is an enlarged view of any of your other views in your project. Here we did a plan example, but you can actually use the callout tool on sections and elevations as well. Callout shapes can be either a simple rectangle or they can be a custom shape, and you use your callout views to focus in on a certain area that you want to document in a little bit more detail in your project.